This video is to specifically address the expectations within Unit 1, Activity 5, based on the question that we will be answering in the form of an essay. That is 1,000 to 1,500 words. This video will also just specifically focus on creating a thesis. When we are in the writing process, we have to have the understanding that before we begin, we have an understanding of the two texts that we will be comparing. That we will be comparing Oedipus the King and the story of Hamlet in order to evaluate our perspective on the answer to this question. In essay writing for a literary analysis, we begin with a question that we are being asked. Then we create a thesis, which is our statement as to what is the answer that we will be evaluating within this essay. The question is, which character's fatal flaw is more detrimental to the character's demonstration of resiliency, Oedipus or Hamlet? In order to answer this question, there are a few things that we have to evaluate first. Number one, I highly encourage you to work towards and lean towards the play that you understand and the character that you understand the best, and to focus on that play for your thesis. However, there's a few other things that we can consider when we're going through evaluating fatal flaws of that character and their demonstration of resiliency. In your content, you will notice at the bottom of that stage when I clicked on it, that there are actually compare and contrast charts, as well as Venn diagrams that you can access in order to evaluate each of the characters and the characteristics that you will need for this particular essay. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for everybody. And so what I did was I started thinking about the comparisons between these characters, and I started to write down a number of ideas. So I needed to write down the demonstration or the definition of resilience. So I had copied and pasted that from Unit 1, Activity 1. Another concept was that the free will versus fate that we evaluated in discussions, as well as in the worksheets when we were reading through the plays. These were some of the comparisons that I noted. Oedipus seeks answers and is a go-getter. Hamlet is not. Oedipus is arrogant and hot-headed, whereas Hamlet is passive and inactive. Oedipus causes problems because he refuses to listen, and Hamlet causes problems because he doesn't believe in himself. Their position, they are both princes, but Oedipus earns his position as king. Unfortunately, the problem with that is that he killed his father unknowingly and assumed his position. However, it's because of the story of the Sphinx that he becomes that king, whereas Hamlet does not move position. Reputation, Oedipus cares how people view him, whereas Hamlet does not. The impact of supernatural forces and the desire to uncover the truth. For Oedipus seeks justice for what has happened to the king, and then as well for himself. And Hamlet just seeks revenge for the death of his father. I think it's also important to consider how they treat the characters around him, and that Oedipus loves Jocasta even though he realizes the truth, and Hamlet cuts out Ophelia even though she has done nothing to not support him. So these were just some of the characters that I was looking at, characteristics of each of the characters. Based on this, I know Hamlet better. I might lean towards Hamlet because I know that play inside and out and argue how he actually demonstrates resiliency through the play. However, if I'm to look at some of these examples, I might want to get to know a little bit more about Oedipus because I'm seeing a stronger argument towards that question of how the fatal flaws that the character has demonstrates greater resiliency. So even though it's their downfall, that they demonstrate resiliency because of it. And that's ultimately what this is asking you, is both of these characters have fatal flaws. Do they demonstrate resiliency in the face of these, or do they succumb to them? So this is the key thing that you need to evaluate, is that you can actually choose one character over the other and do a comparative, Or you can say neither of these characters or both of these characters. But however you decide to present the demonstration of an understanding of their fatal flaws and how they demonstrate resiliency, that's what's going to lead us into how we create that thesis statement. So I'm going to point to you something really quickly, is that I'm hopefully going to be able to upload it into the content in just a little bit. On the course homepage, I have linked to you a slideshow, and I use this with my in-person class. So that's where it's coming from, that when we were creating thesis statements, we were working on making them better and juicier thesis statements so that they fully cover the scope of what we're trying to answer in that question. So if I was to open up that slideshow, it looks like this. And the key thing is this slideshow is simply guiding you through so that you can watch this video. In this video, there are 4 steps that you can go through to make better thesis statements. And I would highly encourage you to watch this video, look at the exemplar provided within it, and create and write and rewrite your own thesis. So using these steps, I actually created a Google Doc where I went through those steps. My first thesis statement that I created based on this particular question was this, and I'm going to identify also that I was supporting a student in writing their thesis statement, and so this also came from them. So this very first step is an immediate response to answer that question. This student has chosen Oedipus as the focus of their essay, and so they demonstrated Oedipus had a greater fatal flaw that led to a stronger demonstration of resilience. Does it answer this question? Yes, it does, because it's asking you about a fatal flaw, which of these 2 characters, and that it demonstrates resiliency. However, we can make it better. So the second step was to refine it, to add in more details and to ensure that we're providing details specific to these components and answering the question. So in that revision, I came up with Oedipus the king demonstrates Oedipus's flaws of stubbornness, pride, and overconfidence, leading to a stronger demonstration of resiliency as compared to Hamlet. Here's the key part, is that we need to make sure that we're including the comparative, that we are not just writing about Oedipus. We are demonstrating how Oedipus, his fatal flaws, demonstrates greater resiliency in himself as compared to Hamlet. So we need to make sure in our thesis statement that we include that. So let's go further down, because the next part, the next step, is that we've answered that question and we've let in more details. Did you notice that we, instead of just saying fatal flaw, that we identified what the fatal flaws were? We've still only identified that it leads to a stronger demonstration of resiliency. Here's the key thing. You want to make sure your tenses are the same. So if you are referring to these events or this character in the past, you need to make sure that all of your sentences and phrases link it to the past rather than a present tense of this is occurring now. And that was something that I was very conscious of when I was writing this one, and I may have a few mistakes that I still need to figure out. So I've answered what the flaws were, but this stronger demonstration of resiliency, I don't really have a whole lot of details there. Step number 3 is to provide examples. That's how I came up with this third and what I would consider the last one. There's actually a 4th step, but I feel pretty confident in this statement that it includes everything and that it answers the question. My final step and thesis statement that I will possibly use is Oedipus the king illuminates, I changed that word, illuminates Oedipus's fatal flaws of stubbornness and pride, which is also known as hubris, which leads to a demonstration of resiliency as compared to Hamlet, as he sought the truth about the king and ultimately stumbled upon the devastating realization of his own fate and destiny. So this is the example. I tried to be brief. If you wanted to put more events in there, totally understandable, as it's what is his resiliency or what he had to overcome. That's what this example was provided to do, as well as we talked about free will versus fate. So I decided to include the concept of fate within that thesis statement. So here's what I'm going to do now is the next step is to go into, we're going to go back into that content. I need you to email that thesis statement to me so that I can see what it is that you're working on. You can simply do it within the program or my Gmail address, but I would really like to see your thesis statement so that I can make a comment on it and ask you to continue to work on it or illuminate some of the other ideas that need to be included. So I don't want to go into there. I want to go into content. We're going to go back in there and look at the next step. So if you've created a thesis statement and gone through those steps to make it the best that you can, and you've emailed it to me, you are welcome to carry on in the activity. So that was the first step, is formulating an idea. And second is writing a thesis statement. So we've formulated an idea. I'll have to change that again, just making sure. Yep, okay, it's the right question. And creating a strong thesis statement. And then the next step is you're going to pre-write or create. There's where I put it. I put it in the wrong step. I'll have to make sure that I fix that. So that's in the pre-writing stage to go with the information, and then creating an outline. I did want you to know that there is the possible comparative essay here that you can click on. Let's just click on that and see what it opens. You can actually use this if you would like. You can type right in that if you're able to do that. Or you can create your own organizer, whatever it is that you would like to present within your essay. This organizer, whatever form it takes, if it's this one or one that you create, needs to be submitted to the Dropbox. It is evaluated. I just wanted to point that out. So when we go down here, the steps that you should be taking this week are creating that thesis statement, email it to me, create an organizer, and you're going to hand it in for evaluation. If you see these icons beside the Dropbox is also provided in content. This means that there is an assessment. It's like a little key. And I just wanted to point out what this means. This is an originality check. So for both the essay outline and the final essay that you're going to hand in, they are both for marks, and they both have this originality check. What this does for me is it puts your report and your organizer into turnitin.com, which is an electronic scanning website that will search for plagiarism. So I just wanted you to know how important it is for you to not find information and copy and paste it into yours. It does only need to be 1,000 to 1,500 words, and that you need to ensure that you're not plagiarizing any parts or quotes or references within your essay, because it is checking for me. It is such a valuable tool with online learning. I also wanted to point out that in that content, there was a great deal of information, and I even made a video about how to access Mla Citation. Just scrolling down right here, Mla Citation is such an important part. It provides in-text referencing to quotes and non-quoted references to the text, events that happen in the play and where they happen. I provided a video and links for anything that you might need for those, and how important it is for you to provide in-text and citation references in a works cited format, an MLA. So there's a tutorial right here, right within the content that you can access, and additions and sources and references that will help you make sure that you cite that information properly within. I've even provided an example of what it should look like within that video so that you can see it. So be sure that you are on top of the due dates. By Friday, you will have submitted to me a thesis statement by email, and you will have worked on the essay organizer, remembering that if your organizer changes, so does your thesis.